In the golden age of Hollywood, where fame glittered brighter than the sun and egos clashed behind the velvet curtains of stardom, there were feuds so fierce they shaped entire careers, tainted lifelong reputations, and defined the undercurrents of jealousy, betrayal, and raw ambition. Among the most controversial and intensely whispered about was the deep and burning hatred one legendary star harbored for another, animosity so profound it shadowed decades of silver screen legacy. This is the untold story of the actor who utterly hated Kirk Douglas, the man with the cleft chin, dazzling smile, and a steel resolve behind every role he played. Though to the public, Douglas was a hero, a gladiator, a maverick who dared to confront the Hollywood blacklist. Those who worked with him often whispered of another Sita, tyrannical perfectionist, an opportunist, a man whose charm masked his ruthless hunger for control. One man in particular, whose name is etched in Hollywood's pantheon but whose disdain for Douglas was both personal and professional, refused to forgive or forget what happened behind the scenes. That man was Burt Lancaster, towering figure in his own right. A star with a ferocious pride, a man who had no patience for deceit or betrayal. Their animosity, buried under layers of red carpet smiles and studio-forced diplomacy, was as volatile as gasoline near a lit match. It all began in the late 1940s. When both actors were rising forces, Douglas with his intense gaze and magnetic charisma, Lancaster with his athleticism and raw emotional power. The two first collaborated on I Walk Alone in 1947, and while the movie was a moderate success, the real fireworks erupted off-screen. Lancaster, who had fought in World War II and brought with him a soldier's discipline and code of honor, was appalled by Douglas's manipulative tactics, which included cozying up to producers behind his back, rewriting scenes without consent, and undermining co-stars to gain more screen time. As their careers advanced, they were cast together again in several films, including the iconic gunfight at the OK Corral, where Douglas played the infamous Doc Holliday, and Lancaster portrayed the stoic Wyatt Earp. The tension was palpable. Throughout filming, crew members later revealed that Lancaster would deliberately ruin takes where Douglas delivered strong performances, or walk off set in protest when Douglas attempted to insert himself in scenes that weren't his. But the feud wasn't just artistic, it turned deeply personal when rumors spread that Douglas had seduced one of Lancaster's former lovers, an up-and-coming starlet who had been close to Lancaster during his early career struggles. The betrayal was never confirmed publicly, but insiders in Hollywood swore by it. The bitter undertones seeped into every joint appearance, every forced smile at premieres, every public denial that there was bad blood. Yet the rivalry came to a boil during the production of 7 Days in May, in 1964. This was supposed to be a defining political thriller, and Lancaster, who was also producing, handpicked the script. He reluctantly agreed to cast Douglas, due to studio pressure and the box office appeal of the Douglas-Lancaster pairing, but the old wounds reopened quickly. Douglas allegedly demanded script changes to give his character more moral weight, clashed with director John Frankenheimer, and even tried to sway the political tone of the film. Lancaster, a staunch progressive who was deeply invested in the film's messaging, was furious. According to biographer Kate Buford, Lancaster confronted Douglas in front of the entire crew, accusing him of being a phony liberal who only cared about his image, not the truth. From that day on, their professional relationship became irreparable. Douglas, always image-conscious, tried to downplay the feud in interviews, praising Lancaster's talent but stopping short of calling him a friend. Lancaster, however, was not so diplomatic. In private conversations that only emerged decades later, he reportedly referred to Douglas as a snake in a star's suit, and said working with him was like shaking hands with a knife. Their final collaboration in Tough Guys, in 1986, was less a reunion and more a silent truce brokered by studios hungry for nostalgia. By then, both men were aging icons, and the movie, while a commercial novelty, couldn't hide the frost. Between them, observers noted that even during promotional tours, they traveled separately, rarely sat together, and barely made eye contact during interviews. But the hatred didn't die there. In the twilight years of his life, Lancaster gave a candid interview, ever published but recorded on tape, where he confessed that Douglas had once backstabbed not only him but other actors during the McCarthy era, cooperating quietly with studios while pretending to be an advocate for blacklisted writers. This revelation struck hard when paired with Douglas's later claims that he had helped break the blacklist by crediting Dalton Trumbo on Spartacus. According to Lancaster's account, Douglas only did so after the tide had turned, and it was safe to be brave. He wasn't Spartacus, Lancaster said bitterly. He was just late to the revolution. These remarks, which only surfaced after both actors had passed, reopened old Hollywood debates and prompted critics to re-examine Douglas's legacy. While many still hail him as a hero of the industry, others now see the possibility of a more complex figure, one who may have worn his righteousness like a mask. What makes this feud so haunting is not just its longevity, but its emotional core. Lancaster and Douglas were two sides of the same coin, both sons of working-class immigrants, both self-made men, both fiercely intelligent, but with diametrically opposed values. Lancaster valued loyalty, principle, and authenticity. Douglas, some say, valued success above all else. Their shared history reads like a Greek tragedy: partners, rivals, enemies, mirrors. In his memoir, Douglas tried to soften the narrative, writing, "Bert was tough, and we had our spats, but we respected each other." Yet those who knew them best say that the respect was one-sided and that Lancaster never forgave what he saw as decades of deceit, manipulation, and false friendship. When Lancaster died in 1994, Douglas attended the funeral but sat near the back, silent and alone. He did not speak, no eulogy, no statement, just a brief appearance and a quick exit. Those present recall the moment as heavy with irony, the man who had so often played Lancaster's cinematic partner unable to publicly mourn him. And when Douglas himself passed away in 2020 at the age of 103, tributes poured in, but a few seasoned voices reminded the world that not everyone saw Kirk as a saint. There were those, like Lancaster, who saw the real man behind the myth, the actor behind the mask, and wanted no part of the illusion. So why did this hatred matter? Because it revealed something profound about Hollywood's golden age. Even amid the glamour and gold, the truth was often uglier than the pictures. That the greatest performances weren't always on screen, and that sometimes the most heroic characters were the ones who walked away. The feud between Burt Lancaster and Kirk Douglas was not just a clash of personalities, it was a war of ideals. And now, decades later, we finally know the reason why one man utterly hated the other.
Please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell icon.